All right, so your warm up is on your screen right now, and what I want you to do is so you have 8 objects on your on like this kind of scale, and I want you to, based on your own knowledge, order them from what you think is the smallest to what you think is the largest. So you have an atom, you have a bacteria, you have a human red blood cell, a penny, a flu virus, an animal cell, a protein, and a mitochondria. So I don't want you to Google anything. I just want you to, just based on your own knowledge, put them in the order from what you think is the smallest to the largest. And I will give you about 5 minutes to do that. So yeah. Oops. Oh yeah, and also when you're done putting them in your order, you could either write it down or you could like type it in the chat, but we will go over them at 7:08. So just make sure that you have your answers down somewhere. All right, so I'm gonna stop for now, and if you are not done yet, that's okay. We will be going over the answers. So, okay, hold on a sec. Okay, so from what I've seen in the chat, you guys are actually pretty. I can see that you guys are all kind of familiar with this. So yeah, a lot of you said that the atom here is the smallest, and you are correct. An atom is the smallest out of all of these objects. In fact, it is probably the smallest thing in the entire universe. So good job on that. And from here, it kind of gets a little tricky because our next smallest thing is this protein. So we're going to put that over here. Okay, and so next up is our flu virus. A virus is actually way smaller than any of these cells over here because they need to like get into cells to infect them. So our virus will be third on our third smallest. And so next up, we have some structures inside cells, which are the mitochondria. And we also and so the mitochondria and the bacteria are actually about the same size. So they will be next up on our size scale. Next up, we will have our human red blood cell, and that is bigger than all of these. Next up is our animal cell. I think a lot of you put this as towards the bigger end, so good job on that. And lastly, obviously, our penny is the largest. So overall, good job on that, everybody. And so this is the correct order. We have our atom as our smallest, then it's the protein, the flu virus, the bacteria slash mitochondria. They're about the same size again. We have our human red blood cell, and animal cell, and our penny. All right. So today we will be learning about chemical bases. And like I said in an email, I think I said it today, we will be talking about a little bit about chemistry. So it's kind of a basic introduction. And so here are our learning targets. Students will be able to know each level of the chemical basis size scale, understand the anatomy of an atom, and describe the 4 essential organic compounds. And more information will come on that later. All right, so here we have our chemical basis scale. I actually do not know if this is the official name, but this is what I like to call it. And so as you can see, it's kind of like a pyramid. At the top, you have your atoms, which like in the warm-up, a lot of you said were the smallest. And so at our top, we have our smallest thing, which are the atoms. And then as we go down towards the pyramid, the size of each of these things will increase. So our largest in this size scale would be our cells. All right, so now we're going to talk about atoms, which, like I said before, atoms are really, really, really tiny. They are so small you cannot see them with your eyes or any microscope for that matter. And so, yeah, atoms are the smallest unit of matter. And yeah, so atoms are the smallest unit of matter, and matter is anything that you can touch, taste, smell, see, or feel. I mean, yeah, so anything that you can interact with your 5 senses, that is matter. And so an atom, it absorbs energy in the form of heat, light, or sound. And so it vibrates and then releases that energy because atoms like to have as little energy as possible. So this is very important. So you must remember that atoms do not like to have a lot of energy, and more information will come on that later, but just remember that. And all atoms are made out of protons, neutrons, and electrons. As you can see in the diagram to the right, that is kind of like the anatomy of an atom. And so these protons, neutrons, and electrons, they're known as subatomic particles, or things that are even smaller than atoms, which, yes, even though I said atoms are really small, there are even smaller things than them. But I'm pretty sure after this, there won't be anything that's smaller. And so, yeah. And so on this diagram right here, you might notice that there are these signs here. You have a negative sign and a positive sign. And these actually indicate the charges or of each of these particles. And so these atoms' charges, the protons, neutrons, and electrons, they're actually really important because they determine how the atom behaves with other atoms, and this will be very important later on. So as you can see in the diagram, in the center of our atom, we have our neutrons and protons. And so based on the picture, who can guess what charge protons have? And you can just raise your hand for that. Or you could just say it out loud.
Protons are positive charged.
Yeah, very good. I couldn't see who that was, but whoever that was, great job. Protons do have a positive charge. And so on the flip side, who can tell me what charge electrons have?
They have a negative charge.
Yes, electrons have a negative charge. Now, these charges are very important because, like I said before, they help determine how the atom behaves. And so you might know that if you have two magnets, they have poles. One pole is a positive, and the other end is a negative charge. And so if you try to force the two magnets together, if you have the positive and the negative ends, they'll stick together. But the negative and a negative, or a positive and positive end, they will really resist trying to come together. And like even no matter how hard you force it, you can't really get them to stick together. And essentially that is what's happening in these atoms. So the reason why the electrons are kind of like orbiting the positive protons is because negative charges attract. And that is a very important thing in what we're going to talk about today. So negative charges attract. And so the electrons are basically getting pulled in like a magnet by the positively charged protons. And so our third particle in here is our neutrons. Neutrons actually don't have a charge. You might think that neutron sounds like neutral. And so that's essentially what they kind of are like. They have no charge. And yeah, that's basically everything about subatomic particles. And so you might notice that there's a second diagram called the Rutherford model of the atom. And this is because as scientists slowly began to understand how atoms were structured they noticed that the electrons kind of are crazy around the center. So they will move around really quickly in these orbits. And so that is how this is a more accurate description or diagram of an atom. Oh yeah, and I probably should have said this before I started, but I think there was a worksheet that I sent along with everyone to their emails, and if you have that, that's great. Open it up and try to fill it out as we follow along. But if you don't have it, that's okay as well. I will go over the questions and answers at the end of class. So yeah. All right, so we were talking about electrons. And so actually electrons, they aren't just one, just one around it. There are actually multiple shells or various energy levels. Like I said, electrons move outside the atom's nucleus in various shells or energy levels. And so the electrons closest to And so actually you can kind of think of an atom as like a mini solar system. So you know how in the center of our solar system there's a sun? And so the sun basically keeps every planet inside with the power of gravity. And so the closer you get to the sun, the stronger the pull of gravity. And the farther you get away, the less force of gravity you will feel. And that is basically what's happening inside an atom. So the electrons closest to the nucleus are called core electrons, and they have the strongest attractive force to the positively charged nucleus because, like I said before, positive and a negative or opposite forces, opposite charges, attract. And so they are the most stable. So when stable, which means that they have the least amount of energy. And so on the opposite side, you have your valence electrons, which are electrons in shells or like orbit paths, if you're thinking about it like a mini solar system, that are farthest away from the nucleus. And so the farther away from the nucleus or center you get, the more unstable the electrons become. So they are more likely to break away from the nucleus. And going back to my solar system example, if you have so like planets like or asteroids farthest away from the sun, the force of gravity is not as strong on them, so they're more likely to fly off into space than like say like a planet close to the sun like Earth. It will always stay close to the sun because the force of gravity is simply stronger. Okay, and so the number of electrons in each of these shells or orbits varies and so the shell or like orbit path closest to the nucleus holds 2 electrons, the next shell holds 8, and a third shell holds 18. So as you can see, the further out you get, the more electrons there will be in the shells. Okay, and that is basically everything about electron shells. Just remember that it is kind of like that an atom is sort of like a mini solar system. Okay, so next up on our size scale, we have molecules. And molecules are groups of atoms that bond together, or they kind of like join together like Legos. And atoms bond together to lower their energy because, like I said before, atoms are kind of lazy. They do not like to have a lot of energy. And this process is called atomic bonding. And you might see that it has the word atom in it. And so if a molecule is made out of 2 or more atoms, it is called a compound. And so a great example of this would be the water molecule, as you can see on the right. So you might have heard that water can be referred to as H2O. Okay. Yeah, also, yeah, this is kind of like distracting, but I will go back through the PowerPoint after I'm done, after everything, so yeah. And so, yeah, like I said before, the water molecule, it has 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom in it that are kind of like stuck together like Legos. And so that's kind of like how it works. And so, yeah, that's why the abbreviation for water is called H2O because there's 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. All right, so one type of molecule is called an organic compound. And so an organic compound is created through the bonding or like sticking together of hydrogen, carbon, and other elements. And these 2 elements, hydrogen and carbon, they make up more than 90% of every living thing. And that's why they're known as organic elements. Now, if you've heard of like organic before, you probably know that it means like it's related to life. And so because hydrogen and carbon make up that much of every living thing, they're known as organic elements. Okay, so There are 4 essential or like very important organic compounds. The first organic compound is a carbohydrate, or that's basically like a fancy scientific word for sugar. And so the atoms or elements involved are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the function of these carbohydrates or sugars is that they provide energy for an organism. That's why like maybe after you eat some candy or anything with sugar, you feel like really energized or like a sugar high almost. And that's because, yeah, like I said, carbohydrates or sugars provide energy. And so our next organic compound is our lipids. And lipids are also known as fats. And so the elements involved in lipids are the same as carbohydrates. You have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the function for lipids or fats is that it stores energy for an organism. And that's kind of like the same in our bodies. Like everybody has a little bit of body fat because it stores energy for you. Like a person who does not have body fat will basically not function anymore because they don't have any energy. And so our third essential compound are proteins. And so the elements involved in these are kind of the same as the two above. You have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And also you will have nitrogen and sulfur, which are 2 more elements or types of atoms. And what proteins do are they help with the functioning of the body, including structure and regulation. So basically proteins are kind of like the building blocks of your body. That's why like maybe if you've heard before like meat or like contains proteins. So if like maybe you've heard before that if you eat a lot of meat or things including proteins, you will grow. And that's kind of correct because like proteins help your body grow basically. And so our last organic compound will be nucleic acids. And so like the elements like every organic compound before, they have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, those 3 essential elements. And they also have nitrogen and phosphorus, which are 2 more types of atoms. And so what nucleic acids do are that they store information that the body uses to make proteins. And if you were here last week, you might have heard me talking about the nucleus of a cell and how that includes nucleic acids. And that is kind of like the relationship that nucleic acids are basically like a building, like a building manual for an organism. So those are our 4 essential organic compounds. And you might have already noticed, but carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, all 4 of these compounds have these 3 elements. So they're very essential towards life and how to maintain it. Okay, so lastly, on our size scale, we have organelles and cells. And so I've actually talked about this last week. So this is kind of more so a review. So organelles are known as the organs of a cell, and they are made out of molecules, mainly the 4 essential compounds that I talked about in the last slide. So every organelle is made out of one of those 4 compounds. And the shape of the molecules that makes up the organelle determines the organelle's function or purpose in the cell. And so on the diagram to the right, you can see some examples of organelles and like what they do in the cell. And so lastly, on our size scale, we have the actual cell, which is the biggest out of all of them. They are made out of a cell is a system made out of many organelles and molecules. And as you can see in the diagram to the right, again, you can see that there are a lot of organelles that go into a cell. Okay, and that's basically the presentation for today. Is there I know that somebody asked to go back to the protein slide. So I will do that right now. And if there's anything that you guys want me to go back to, I can do it right now. Okay, and when you're done with everything on this slide, please tell me so we can go over the answers to our worksheet. Okay, so it seems that everybody is done, so I will pull up our worksheet and we will go over the answers together. Okay, so our first question was, what is the smallest thing on the chemical basis scale and what is the largest? And can anybody tell me what the answer would be for that one? Again, you can just raise your hand or just talk. Yeah, I think Julie.
The smallest is the atom and the biggest is the penny.
Yeah, actually that was from our warm-up, but I was talking about the actual PowerPoint. So you got the atom correct though, but the largest is actually our cell. And it seems that some people don't have the worksheet, so I will pull that up right now. Okay, so now the questions are on the screen so everybody can see. All right, so our second question will be true or false. Atoms like to have as little energy as possible.
True.
Yes, that is true. Atoms do like to have as little energy as possible. Again, like how I like to think about it, atoms are kind of lazy. They do not like to have a lot of energy. So, yeah. And thirdly, what three particles are atoms made out of?
Nucleus, electron, and proton.
Okay, so yeah, you got the nucleus kind of correct, or I mean the electrons. So you are correct that an atom has a nucleus, but actually inside the nucleus you have your neutrons and your protons, and those two things make up the nucleus of an atom. So the three particles that an atom is made out of are your protons, your neutrons, and your electrons. But yeah, good job on the electrons. And so fourthly, what does it mean when a particle is subatomic? I'll give you guys a hint on this one because it seems like some of you are having a little bit of trouble. So sub actually is a Greek root a Greek prefix meaning below. So it basically means below atomic. So based on that, what do you think that subatomic means?
Below atomic. It basically that it should mean like it should mean smaller than an atom.
Yeah, that is basically the answer. So subatomic essentially means below atomic level in size. So yes, when something is subatomic, it is smaller than an atom. So good job. And fifthly, true or false, opposite charges repel one another.
False.
Yes, that is very important. I am very glad that you all chose false because yeah, like I said before, if you've ever worked with magnets before, you'll know that opposite charges attract each other. That's why the north and south poles will like stick together. And so number 6, I know that some of you guys don't know how to like probably couldn't match this, but for that you could like say you could say the number first and then the letter that it matches with. So what charge do protons have?
I think it's positive.
Yes, protons have a positive charge. And you can actually think about it this way. Pro usually means like positive or like right. So protons, yeah, they do have a positive charge. And yeah, so it seems somebody's already typed in the answers. So like I said before, protons match with B, they have a positive charge. Electrons have a negative charge, which matches with C. And 3, neutrons kind of sounds like neutral, so they have no charge or they are neutral. And so next, the electrons closest to the nucleus are called blank electrons, and the electrons farthest away from the nucleus are called what electrons? Now, this one is also kind of a little harder, but I'll give you guys a hint on this one. So you can think of the nucleus as like a core, and so a core kind of is like a center. So what type of electrons
Core
are?
electrons?
Sorry, what was that?
Core electrons?
Yes, the electrons closest to the nucleus are called core electrons. And so yeah, just like remember that core means center. So the closer you get to the center, then it's the closer to the core. And so I might as well just say that the electrons farthest away from the nucleus are called valence electrons. Now this one's a little harder to remember because I don't know like any relationship between valence to like distance, but just remember that the farther away you get from the nucleus, the electrons are called valence electrons. And so number 8, why do atoms bond or why do they stick together?
A molecule is made of 2 or more atoms.
Yeah, that's kind of like the next question, but that is kind of correct that atoms, they bond together to lower their energies. And because, like I said before, atoms are lazy, they do not like to have a lot of energy. So by bonding, they kind of like release that. They become less energized. And so, yeah, like somebody's already said, number 9, what is the difference between an atom and a molecule? An atom is what makes up a molecule, and a molecule is made out of atoms. So yeah, basically the atom is smaller and the molecule is bigger. And so next, what 3 elements are most necessary for life? This one is kind of related to organic compounds, so if you remember anything from there, please say so.
Carbohydrates, liquids, protein, and I think that's it.
Yeah, those are the names of the 4 essential compounds, but do you know what 3 elements all of them have, or what 3 elements are they made out of?
carbohydrates, they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And then for liquids, they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And then for protein, they contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. And I don't know how to pronounce the last one, but I think that it contains carbon.
Yeah, so you actually did not need to say the last two elements for the proteins and the nucleic acids. All you needed to know was that carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, they are the three elements most necessary for life here on Earth. And so, like I said before, that's why they're known as organic elements, is because they make up basically everything on life. And yeah, I kind of gave away the answer for number 11. Carbon and hydrogen are known as organic elements. And so yeah, that kind of also answers number 12. What elements are carbohydrates made out of? They're made out of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, which are the three essential elements. And like I said before, as a matter of fact, all four of the organic compounds contain these three elements. And so the last three questions, what is the function of a nucleic acid? Okay, it seems that you guys are having a little trouble with this one. That's okay. Nucleic acids are kind of like the instruction manual of an organism. So you can kind of, so yeah, they basically provide instructions on how to build a organism or like any body for that matter. And so yeah, so organelles are known as what? It's very similar. The name is almost like kind of written inside organelles. It's kind of hidden, but not really. So it should be pretty kind of easy to infer. Yeah, so yes, organelles are also known as the organs of a cell. And lastly, what is a cell made out of? So this was already kind of answered by 14. Cells are made out of organelles and many, many molecules. And so yeah, that's basically everything on the worksheet. And I will send the answer key to this if you guys did not get it already, if you guys did not get the answers. And yeah, that's basically all I have for you today. Great job, everybody. I know that today was kind of a little harder because it's this is actually like kind of high school level, so but great job everybody for like kind of sticking through. And I think that next week's lesson it will be probably a little more interesting and fun than the last two lessons. I know that they were just like taking notes and that stuff, but yeah, I hope that next week will be a little more interesting. And yeah, that's basically all I have for you. So have a nice week, and I will see you guys Thursday.